Hello, my name's Miles Cheetham. I'm going to share with you some of my experiences around open data, working with open banking in the UK, where I've been a member of the team at the Open Banking Implementation Entity for the last 4 years, and latterly the work that I've been doing on Open Energy, which is an Innovate UK modernising energy data access project, where we're looking at how we might use the same infrastructure and approach to unlock the data that exists in the energy system and decarbonise faster. So let's see where we are, what we've learned. So the first thing to talk about really is open banking and where it's got to. So this is now 2.5 years old, and today we have 273 regulated providers, 196 of those third-party providers, so providing a service to consumers or small business, and 77 account providers. Open banking has been very successful in the UK. It basically has 100% coverage in the retail banking market. And past 1 million customers at the beginning of the year is now already surpassed 2 million customers, despite the COVID-19 shock. Now, what's actually happened is we've created an ecosystem, and there are within this company something like another several hundred that are queuing up behind it, either that are applying for authorization or that have in fact taken on an agency agreement working with third parties who've already got their authorization from the Financial Conduct Authority, who are the regulator in the UK. It's an ecosystem which is very much about answering consumer needs. It was envisaged by the Competition and Markets Authority as addressing some of the competitive imbalance in the retail banking market, and as a spur to innovation. And that's actually quite what's happened. It's now to the point where you can see a spectrum of use cases, and I'll speak about those in a moment, that address basically every stage in somebody's life. It's really starting to open up a very creative, very innovative environment where businesses are really understanding what consumers need, what small businesses need, and thinking of creative ways to use the open banking infrastructure to address those. It's been actually a massive enabler for new innovation. We can see that there are some incredible opportunities. Already the fintech sector in the UK was strong. Open banking has brought added impetus to this. In the UK, something like 80% of inward investment in Europe is going into the UK's fintech sector. And that's, I should say, fintech investment is going into the UK's fintech sector. And what's actually going on is that the combination of expertise, the open banking infrastructure, the city itself, the availability of investment capital, and government willingness to engage in dialogue, forward-looking regulation has created an environment where this is really beginning to accelerate. And we expect to see some very significant companies emerge from this over the next few years. That will have huge societal and economic benefits. I'm going to talk about some of those things during the course of this presentation. But it's basically underpinning a new industry, and we're more or less seeing this emerge in front of our very eyes at the moment. It's like literally watching this thing form up and start to take shape and develop as we are standing watching. So very interesting environment to be playing in. The kind of things it will do, I mentioned a wide range of use cases. You can see a few use cases that I've put on this screen here. I've broken them down by payments, borrowing, savings, budget, credit scoring, and so on. You can read those for yourselves, but in effect, what we're seeing is tools that really solve problems right across the consumer and small business spectrum. Some of those that I've highlighted, the ones that are in blue, actually I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a moment as well, because part of my remit over the last couple of years has been to run a fintech competition. It's called Open Up 2020, and that's really been about spurring adoption and awareness for open banking. But we'll come back to that in a minute. I think one of the things to really point out about all of this is that third-party providers have been very fast to bringing things to market, test them, learn from them, iterate, move on. It's culturally a very quick, very agile way of working. And what they're able to do is understand what customers are looking for and respond to that, and make sure that their propositions really do hit customer needs squarely on the mark. In some respects, actually, it's starting to go beyond what the mainstream banks already offer. Interestingly, at a meeting I was at not so long ago, a chap from a business bank pointed out that one of the things that open banking, particularly when coupled with smart tools and running AI in the background, it has a better understanding of many small businesses than the branch managers and business managers currently looking after those. A little like a generation ago, your bank manager may have known you personally, probably would have known your family, would have known of you, and would be a good judge of whether you could afford a loan and so on, and understand your business. That has largely disappeared, and these new services are starting to step into that gap, and starting to provide tools that really allow businesses to understand what their financial requirements are, and to meet those effectively. So, for example, rather than just trying to plug a cash flow deficit by invoice discounting, perhaps it's really a requirement for a loan or for an equity investment that might be better suited to that particular company. And it can understand things like that. So we're starting to see a better tailored range of services in small business as well as for the consumer marketplace. This has really been driven by services built on account information. We're now starting to see payments and payment initiation starting to really accelerate and develop some momentum. The first 2 years definitely about services based on understanding, for example, your ability to borrow, top-ups to your savings, building financial resilience, personal finance managers that understand where your spending goes, tools that allow people to improve their credit score, or to perhaps prove that they can afford a loan even if they have a thin credit file. But also things that address the needs of the financially excluded or more vulnerable customers. And on the vulnerable side, we've seen some interesting things like, for example, tools that spot when somebody may be having mental health problems, or even help relatives to manage where perhaps a parent has developed Alzheimer's or some cognitive disability. What this is really doing, though, is starting to redefine the customer relationship. A lot of people now starting to think about these services as being their first port of call when they're thinking about money. And that's going to be an interesting theme, and we'll see how that develops. So it's no longer about your bank being the first port of call. Third-party providers started to come up with these really innovative, creative solutions that address customer needs. That's going to build brand awareness. It's going to build brand loyalty, and ultimately customers will become loyal to these brands, and we'll watch them grow over the next few years. I mentioned the FinTech Challenge that we've been running. So this is a thing called Open Up 2020. You can see the link to it on my screen. Do Google it, you'll find it easily enough. And these names that I'm showing here are the finalists in that. So some of these have become really quite significant players. So out of these, the winners that we can see from this, and these were announced literally just a week ago, are Plum and Mojo, and WageStream and Moneybox. And those four have actually won £150,000 on top of the minimum £50,000 they won. So there's been quite an incentive for this. It was a £1.5 million prize to unlock the power of open banking for consumers. Now, what has really happened with this is we've had an incredible window into how the open banking system ecosystem is developing. We've really understood how these companies are responding to customer needs. They've all had to think very, very carefully and work very hard in order to navigate the landscape during COVID-19. But actually, and quite interestingly, we've seen an acceleration in take-up in some of these, simply because people have needed to get a much better handle on their money management. They've become much more aware of making sure that they're on top of their financial needs. They've built the kind of resilience they need. They're planning harder. They're starting to think much more about these tools, and they've become much more aware of these tools during the course of this pandemic. And that's been one of the spurs which has moved open banking from 1 million to 2 million consumers in the UK in the space of a little over 6 months. So really worthwhile having a look at that. Each one of these you can dive into and look at some of the things that they've been doing. They're all described on the website, and that will give you some sense of the richness of this particular landscape. But it has not all been plain sailing, and there are still things that really need to be sorted out. Earlier in the year, myself and some colleagues wrote a couple of papers for the UK's Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, where we were looking at what needs to be put in place in order for their, what they're calling smart data initiatives to really take flight and to really deliver to the promise that we expect. One of those papers is on the requirements for consumer consent, the other on liability. You can easily find these on the gov.uk website if you just search for consent and liability. Those things are there, and what's interesting is, in effect, the journey that we've been on has allowed us to see a little further. In the UK, we're governed by the European Union GDPR regulation. And what we've been able to understand is the limits to that regulation and where there are gaps and where further consumer protections are required in what are now fairly complex provisioning chains that are developing. I can give you an example, and one that we're all familiar with is scrolling to the bottom of the page when you're setting up an app or signing up for a website, and literally getting to the bottom and clicking agree with no real sense of what it is you've just agreed to. It was just an annoyance that you had to get through. One of the things that we're advocating for is that that process becomes a lot clearer, so that really people understand the purpose of sharing their data, which data is being shared, for how long, and what they can do to amend the consent that they've granted through the use of dashboards and so on. On the liability side, we've done a lot of work understanding the provisioning chains that have developed over the last few years and what the implications might be as other sectors start to open up with data sharing. And what we've come to is that actually there needs to be a much stronger regime for, first of all, understanding where liability lies and the rules around that, but also where there should be customer redress. In the UK, it can be quite difficult if, for example, through no fault of your own and through a data breach by a provider, you're left with some unpleasant consequential shock, which may be financial, could be reputational. And what we've tried to do is to pinpoint that and to say, well, actually, there is a gap here that needs to be thought through, and to make it easier for people to understand where liability lies and to get redress if something happens. We think that's important. It will build trust in the data sharing ecosystem. It'll help drive the digital economy, and we think it's pretty significant from all the work that we've done, the research that's gone on. Direct customer feedback that we've heard and engagement with the industry is all pointing to this. So that's a critical area. We've done a lot of work as well around customer experience. I personally was responsible for developing with my team a set of customer experience guidelines for open banking, which have proven to be very successful, and they've helped people to understand what a good customer experience looks like and how to implement that in the face of the regulations, to make sure that actually you are implementing the regulation in the right way while still doing things in a way that makes sense and feels comfortable and is trusted by consumers. Within that, we've stressed the need to make sure that people understand the value exchange. We can also see the need for consistency across sectors. As I mentioned, I've been working in the energy sector recently. I see a lot of a read across from the work that's been done in open banking that can be applied in that sector, and likewise in others as well. And one of the things that we can see there is that there needs to be a consistency in the customer journey. There needs to be a consistency in the way that consent is granted and managed, so that consumers understand this, regardless which direction they come at it from and which sector they are working in. It will always look the same to them, and they'll be able to understand the way it works, the language, those type of aspects. So those are some of the kind of critical issues that we've identified with our forward radar. The UK Smart Data Initiatives are now considering this as a working group that's been set up, and we expect to see progress on that during the course of the next 6 months into 2021. So where are we going next? Well, we see from all of this some pretty substantial economic, societal, and environmental benefits. In the finance sector, extending open banking to cover insurance, pension savings, those kind of things, that seems to be fairly straightforward. Not always, but there are definite moves to start to create a kind of broader open finance sector. Telecoms is one that I'll return to in a moment. Energy, likewise, shows great promise. Likewise, transport, getting a joined up approach to these different sectors. And rather interestingly, things that can be done to improve reporting around supply chain, the kind of non-financial reporting sector, where, for example, companies can start to understand in far more detail the impact of bringing a product to market, logistics and so on, so that they can get a much better understanding of the real carbon footprint for whatever they deliver or produce. That is something that the European Union are looking at and may become a regulatory requirement in due course. And I find that particularly interesting as we're all trying to decarbonise and become much more environmentally friendly. So those type of things where you can really understand the impact right through your supply chain can all be enabled using the same kind of data sharing infrastructure that we've developed for open banking in the UK. Well, let's have a look at those in some little bit more detail. So open energy is something that I'm particularly interested in and deeply involved in the Innovate UK Modernising Energy Data Access competition. What we're looking at is developing an open standard and in fact an open energy governance platform that allows data sharing, so that, for example, we can really understand the implications for renewables as they're introduced into the energy grid. So as for example, one of the things that happens at the moment is that for any retrofit or installation of more efficient, environmentally friendly heating systems in homes, or for implementing electric vehicle charge points in towns and cities, you really need to understand the impact that will have on the local energy grid. And at the moment, the data for that is not easily shared. And that can lead to delays because the energy provider needs to really understand the implications for any installation on the edge of the grid and what that's likely to mean for them, so that if they need to address capacity constraints or provide more headroom, as they call it, which is available capacity on the network, they can be confident about what the implications would actually be. And to do that, you simply need data. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to encourage the development of an open energy standard that allows that data to be more effectively shared. That will mean that initiatives that seek to decarbonise through encouraging electric vehicles or low carbon technologies for heating purposes in homes and offices can be understood and planned for and implemented much faster, so that the UK, as it's driving towards decarbonising, will be able to get greater momentum. And a lot of local authorities have started to adopt the approach that they need to achieve this in the sort of early 2030s. So there's a lot of impetus behind that. To achieve it, though, we do need this interoperable and cohesive energy data infrastructure. And through that, we aim to establish open marketplaces so that data sharing can flourish in the same way as it's now beginning to in open banking. Ultimately, this is all about sustainability, decarbonisation, and reducing our impact on the planet. So we think this is a really significant thing to do. And then, of course, there's Open Telecom. This is one of the smart data initiatives. Ofcom are the regulator in the UK, and the regulation here will seek to ensure that consumers can instruct their telecoms operator to share their data with third-party providers in more or less the same way as you can with open banking. That will give transparency to consumers so that they can understand what the best communications deal might be, what the coverage is or speed in their area, so they can make better, more informed decisions about which network might be best for them. I think maybe there's something more there as well. And I think actually that we could be pretty ambitious about some of the things that we achieve there. So, just as a for example, and throwing it out there, if you were to combine data from the telco sector and the banking sector, if you spotted somebody who had, through a service designed to help vulnerable customers, suddenly become less communicative, and at the same time showed a different or a change in their payments and the way they spend their money, then you might want to have a look at that. And there are companies already starting to investigate this kind of space and help to address mental health problems, some of the things that we've identified and mentioned before around people with long-term chronic illness and those type of things. We can find clues behaviourally through these type of service that could be very useful. And I think there could be some very good things that come out of it. That's just one example, for example. So that's my whistle-stop tour concluded. For anybody that would like to reach out and talk to me, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me. My work email is miles@icebreaker1.org. And you can find out more about some of the work I've been involved in through either looking at the Open Banking website, the Icebreaker One website, or the DGen website. Any one of those, you'll find some interesting stuff all around the open data environment. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to take time and just talk about my aspect on all of this. And I hope you found this useful. Thank you.